Namaste. You're listening to the Sivana Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SivanaSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the show. If you are a listener of this podcast, you know that I interview so many incredible, amazing guests. But sometimes, and I'm going to confess something here, sometimes I feel overwhelmed. There's just so much information. I talk to so many incredible people. And a lot of times I feel like I don't get to retain as much as I want to from each interview because there's so many of them. And I'm wondering if you feel the same way too. If you are, you're in luck because today's episode is a solo episode just with me, and I plan to do more of these to mix up the interviews a little bit, and so we can pause and reflect and really soak in some of the learnings from the amazing people who come on the show. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10, but I'm not counting the official number of things on the list, so 8 to 10 actual changes that I've made in my life from direct advice that I've received from talking to people on this podcast. Again, there's a lot of information, and I wanted to share with all of you what I actually am implementing in the hopes that this can be useful or inspire you for things that you can actually implement. Because all the things that I'm actually implementing are things that are easy, that anyone can do. I am a busy entrepreneur. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I'm a daughter. I wear a lot of different hats, and my schedule's incredibly jam-packed, as I'm sure yours is as well. So if I can make these shifts, so can you. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into it. Number 1, I am now tongue scraping. So I credit this with Melanie Phillips. I interviewed her in episode 132 of the show, Ayurvedic Daily Routine to Uplevel Your Health and Increase Your Energy. I bought a tongue scraper because I was so inspired by what she said about tongue scraping in that episode. And again, I will summarize for you, but basically in the Ayurvedic tradition, they believe that toxins accumulate overnight, and in your stomach, basically, these toxins accumulate and they kind of bubble up, and they're on the surface of your tongue when you wake up in the morning. So to just drink water and swallow all that, it's like you're swallowing all this stuff that your body actually wanted to eliminate. So you just use a tongue scraper, and it just looks like a little U-shaped instrument on your tongue. And what basically comes off is sort of just like a white type of film. But my tips for you are that you want to pretty aggressively clean your tongue, right? So this is not gentle. You really want to stick your tongue way out of your mouth and then really scrape it and get the gunk off. And call me crazy, but I feel like I have more energy in the morning and I feel more awake faster when I do this. And this is a direct result of the interview I did with Melanie on the show. So I invite you to do this as well and see if you notice a difference. I feel like just basically I'm more awake after I get that gunk off of my tongue. And another tip I wanted to add for you is that traditionally in Ayurveda, the tongue scraper is made of copper. But another close Ayurvedic practitioner friend of mine, who's also featured in my online yoga teacher training, Sahara Rose, clarified for me that even though that's the tradition, it's better to use stainless steel. And I don't remember the exact reasons, but it has to do with women in particular and how copper is actually maybe not the best choice for some women. Basically, the safest thing that you can do is just use stainless steel. So again, you can listen to both Melanie's episode 132 and Sahara's, which was one of my early episodes. It's actually 125, and she talks about the doshas as well, and you can get more info on tongue scraping. But you should be able to get started just with what I've mentioned here, and you can let me know if you feel a difference. All right, the second big change that I've made in my life, again, direct result from the podcast, is I've really adopted an Ayurvedic diet. And this was inspired by all the different Ayurvedic practitioners that I've talked to on the show, but in particular, Akshata Vata Shilvant, who is my Ayurvedic practitioner, and she can do distance consults. And if you're interested in working with her, I really highly recommend it. And you can find her if you go to brettlarkin.com/Ayurveda, because her name's a little tricky to spell. So I've set it up that way that if you want to check it out or get a consult, you can. And I'm going to admit, right, I don't follow this Ayurvedic diet she prescribed for me to a T, 100%, but I definitely do everything she prescribed for my morning routine, and it's made a huge difference. And if you're curious about what that looks like for my specific constitution, she suggested lime water, the first thing that hits my mouth in the morning, with honey and Himalayan sea salt, and then to always have some sort of heavy oat for breakfast. So barley or oatmeal, something like that, that's going to be really grounding for Vata. And Ayurveda is something that intimidated me for years as a yoga teacher. I felt like it was just too complicated. And the reality is it is really complicated, which is why I would encourage you to get a personal consult. That's my big piece of advice, because I wasted years not doing an Ayurvedic diet because I was sort of just trying to figure it out on my own, or reading sort of like clickbait articles that say like Pittas should eat this or Vatas should do this. And it's so much more nuanced than that. It's unbelievable. So if you really want to do it right, just do a consult. For example, in the consults, what I learned is ginger, which is something she was really interested in me having, as a tea would not be appropriate for me at all. Ground ginger in my food would be really fantastic for me. So, I mean, subtle nuance, like differences like that, is sort of how deep Ayurveda goes. So an Ayurvedic diet is something I really recommend, and I recommend getting a consult. Okay, number 3 thing that I've been doing as a direct result from this podcast, learnings I've taken away, is I have been resting more in the afternoon, taking a little afternoon nap or meditation. And this is a direct result of my interview with Judith Hansen-Lassiter. If you haven't listened to those episodes, it's episode 207 and 208. You must do that, because she's an amazing teacher, and she's sort of the voice, the advocate for restorative yoga, which is so needed in the world today, where we're so obsessed with, all the more physical, difficult, challenging, heating forms of this practice. She suggested that everyone should take a shavasana, a 20-minute shavasana in the afternoon, sort of like a siesta. And she pointed out that a lot of different cultures have siestas. It's actually built into their day, because even since the beginning of time, it was understood how important this afternoon rest is. But of course, the modern society we live in today doesn't necessarily recognize that. And it is imperative to restore your well-being. Just think about it. I mean, having however many hours of sleep you're getting, and then no rest, no break for your nervous system until the following evening, it's just too much. It's just too much. And as someone who's also a mother, I see how refreshed my little boy is when he's forced to nap. He's just a totally different person. He's so much happier. His energy is better. His eyes are clearer and brighter. He's just a joy to be around when he gets rest. And to think that, yes, we're adults, but we're really not that different. It's the same. So if you work in an office, even if it's just taking a walk around the block or a couple minutes in the bathroom stall to do some deep breathing or listen to a guided meditation, or if you have an office, by all means, close the door, kick your shoes off, elevate your legs for a little bit, maybe just by putting them on another chair if you have like 2 chairs at your desk. These are all ideas that I really encourage you to check out. And of course, if you're in a situation where you work from home or at home like me, I've actually been doing 20-minute shavasana around 3 or 4 o'clock. It's usually that time when you'd be kind of going for the afternoon coffee, right? Because you feel sluggish. And so many of us, it's just autopilot. It's like, oh, we're feeling sluggish in the afternoon, so we should fix that. We should have a coffee. We should stimulate. We should, get with the program. And the reality is, you feel tired and sluggish because your body's telling you it wants to take a short break. And what I loved about what Judith taught me is she said, because I think a lot of us think, oh, well, if we nap or if we, rest for 20 minutes, we'll wake up all groggy and we maybe won't sleep well when it's time to actually go to bed later at night. And she just debunked all those myths. You can listen to the episode if you want more details, but the summary is that she said, don't fall asleep in this rest, try to stay awake. So you're in essentially Shavasana. If you have trouble with Shavasana, the big tip she said is that you want to have all your joints in flexion. And for me, that was such an aha moment because I realized a lot of the time I was taking Shavasana without all my joints in flexion. And what that means is just that all the major joints in the body are going to be bent. So that means that your head is just rested lightly on a blanket, right? So instead of your head being flat on the mat, you are a little bit dipping the chin into the chest, just a tiny bit by supporting the cervical and with some padding under the head. It means your elbows are bent. So your arms aren't straight out to the sides or even straight alongside your body. I'd suggest bending your elbows and placing one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly or both hands on your belly. And then most importantly, your knees need to be in flexion as well, which would mean that you'd put a bolster under your knees or a rolled up blanket. And this has been a complete game changer for me. And then the other huge game changer is to have an eye pillow, right? To really block out the light and do that for 20 minutes. And again, the goal is not to fall asleep. It is so incredibly healing. And I just use Insight Timer, which is a free app that I use to meditate to. It just has bells and chimes that you can set at different intervals. So I just use that same app, Insight Timer, to set a 20-minute bell for my Shavasana. And because I don't actually fall asleep, when I get up, I feel completely rested, completely nourished because I had the experience of napping and then waking up and feeling really groggy and awful. But again, this is just a mental and physical break. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to fall asleep. You are just aware of your thoughts. And the first 5 minutes of the rest, just like your first 5 minutes of meditation, right, the mind's going to be going nuts, like thinking about things, categorizing things. But that's the joy of 20 minutes, right? That's usually only lasts the first 5 or 10 minutes. And then the rest of the time, you're just giving your nervous system this break that is so desperately needed. And if you think you're going to be drowsy, I just really encourage you to try it because you won't be and you have more energy. It's really, really phenomenal. And she also referred to this as shavasing yourself. And she said when her sons used to get irritated with her if she was in a bad mood, they'd say, "Mom, you need to go shavas yourself." So that's my new favorite phrase. I'm telling everyone if they're a little grumbly that they need to go shavas yourself. And every time I notice myself snapping at my husband or just getting irritated, I know that I need to shavas myself ASAP. All right, I believe this is number 4. The next one is going to bed earlier. I have implemented this as a direct result of talking to Sahara Rose, who I mentioned before. Her podcast, I believe she talks about the Ayurvedic clock, and definitely give that a listen if you want to go deeper into Ayurveda. But what Ayurveda teaches us is that there is a Vata, Pitta, and Kapha time of the day. And you're obviously going to best optimize your sleep if you are asleep before it's a Vata time again. And I believe it's 10 p.m. So you can listen to the podcast for all the details, but there is just so much science and Ayurveda as well that is telling you that you want to go to bed early and that you really want to get in bed by 10 p.m. And so many other incredible healers and coaches and people I respect and admire and know, they all have this internal rule. They got to go to bed by 10. And this is a place for where me personally, having a young child has been fantastic because sometimes I'm going to bed at 9 because we put him to sleep at 8:30. And what is important to understand about this is that the quality of sleep, again, this is according to Ayurveda, is going to be deeper and better between the hours of 9 p.m. and midnight or 1 a.m. than after. So even if you have to get up at 5 a.m., if you go to bed at 9, you're going to be feeling better, more rested than if you went to bed at 11 and got up at 7, even though it's the exact same number of hours of sleep. It's like you're missing the time in the Ayurvedic clock where that sleep is the most beneficial, the most potent. So definitely listen to Sahara's episode if you want all the details on this. But if you just want the bottom line, go to bed by 10 o'clock. It's really that simple. The next thing that I've really implemented from this podcast is that I've completely stopped drinking decaf coffee. I never was a coffee drinker. I've always avoided caffeine. And I used to indulge in decaf coffee just because my husband really likes drinking coffee. And I don't know, it was just kind of a fun treat to have once in a while, but that habit got to be like several times a week at one point. And it was always decaf, but I would still feel the effect of the caffeine. And what really changed this for me was speaking with Izzy Adair. She's amazing. And that is episode 179. And she really talks about how coffee is not great for a lot of different body constitutions. And the thing that really hit home for me is she said, if your coffee is triggering a bowel movement, which I know a lot of people drink coffee to kind of get their system going in that way in the morning. She said that means that that you shouldn't be drinking coffee. That is considered like a negative effect of coffee, according to Ayurveda, that it's too stimulating, it's overstimulating for you. And I've completely cut out even decaf coffee at this point from my life completely. And, sometimes I do miss that yummy coffee flavor taste, but I have to admit, I don't like the way coffee makes me feel, even decaf. The next big thing that I've taken away from the podcast is I feel like just in my yoga practice and my meditation practice overall, I've been a lot more open to subtle energy. And the episode that really springs to mind here is episode 165 and 166, I believe. And that is the transmission of Kundalini energy with Gabriel Cousens. His 2 podcast episodes are a total trip to listen to. I mean, just really fun, incredible stories. But the bottom line is he talks about how he had this huge awakening in India where, basically he just hit nirvana and had a Kundalini awakening throughout his whole body. And it was this just crazy, profound experience, and how energy can be passed down from teacher to student through this tradition called Shaktipat. And after listening to that episode, I think I've just in my own practice been more subconsciously receptive to having ecstatic type experiences in my meditation, chanting, and yoga practice. And since becoming more receptive to that idea, I actually have had more of them. So if you're someone who wants to invite more of that into your practice, I would definitely recommend listening to his episodes. All right, I think we are on 7 or 8 at this point. The other big takeaway I've had is this idea that if an affirmation triggers you, or if something you're reading or something someone says triggers you, that is a really good sign, because it means that your shadow self is in that your shadow self is trying to teach you that's your shadow, basically. So to give a practical example, like an affirmation like, I love money and money loves me. If you find that affirmation triggering, it means that you have some unresolved issues around money. You have a shadow there that you need to go deeper into and explore, so that when you're triggered by these things, it's actually really great and really exciting, because it means you have some self-work, some exploration to do there. And this is dissected in episode 121 with my dear friend, and she's also featured in my online yoga teacher training, Cassandra Reinhardt. That episode's called The Beauty of Your Dark Side, Transform Your Emotional Suffering into Freedom. So really great episode. Definitely listen to the whole thing. But that was sort of my big aha moment from that, because sometimes I just think, oh, well, this affirmation doesn't resonate with me, or like, ugh, I don't like that one. And the reality, and then I just sort of cast it aside and move on. And the reality is, like, if you're feeling that way, there's potent insights for you to discover by going deeper into that. And I think there's a lot of learning you can take away if you understand that basic concept. And last but not least, I am just trying to be on social media less. I feel like that's something that was really echoed by so many experts that I've talked to on this show. This idea that you don't want to start your day by looking at your phone. You don't want to go to bed at night having your phone or social media being the last thing you look at. And I think all of us know this on a very instinctual level, but it's way harder to do than it is to talk about, right? It's really challenging to have that discipline that you don't look at your phone until, after you do your practice, or, after you birth, like whatever. And for a lot of us, this means you have to put your phone on airplane mode, or you have to find an alarm clock that's not your phone. This was echoed by so many people. And I still fail at this sometimes, right? Like I still sometimes check my phone or check the email before bed, but I'm really trying to be better. And I've really gotten great at not doing it in the morning. We need to protect our energy. No one else is going to do that for us. You need to prioritize your time, your health, your happiness. You deserve some time in the morning before the rest of, everything else hits you, right? We need that time for ourselves. We live in the information age, which is so wonderful. And there's so many benefits to being alive during this time. And the internet has brought us so many gifts, enhanced communication, communities that never would have been possible through people connecting online. This enhanced connection is incredible, but it also is in a state of extreme excess where it's draining our energy. It can leave you incredibly depleted if you don't set up boundaries. And no one really talks about setting up those boundaries, and no one's really rewarding you for setting up those boundaries, right? Like even in my own business, I feel like everyone needs an instant response and an instant answer. And that is something I've been trying so badly to move away from and to prioritize that self-care. So get the phone on airplane mode more often in the morning, in the evening. And I think that that's a basic tip, but super, super powerful. So I'm curious to hear from all of you now. What aha moments have you had with the show over the past couple months or past couple years, depending how long you've been listening? I'd really love to hear from you. And I think the things that I mentioned here, and I'll recap them, are really easy things that you could start doing right now. Tongue scraping, considering an Ayurvedic consult or an Ayurvedic diet, taking shavasing yourself, right? Taking that nap, going to bed earlier, seeing if you can get rid of caffeine or get rid of coffee, if that's something you're interested in. Being more open to subtle energy and to maybe ecstatic experiences, because I think a lot of times we think that experiences like that can only happen in India, right? Or they can only happen to teachers who've been, studying for 20 years, or can only happen through Shaktipat, transmission of teacher to student. And that's just not true. That's a self-limiting belief. And when you let go of that, all of a sudden you're going to have maybe ecstatic experiences during your practice. That's definitely happened for me. And if you guys are interested in that, let me know, because I'd be happy to do an episode on it. Consume less social media, and then the one about the affirmations, right? If an affirmation or a statement or a quote triggers you, that you need to dive and go deeper there. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Remember, this whole podcast is made possible by Sivana Spirit. It's an incredible family-owned company. They make this show possible. So the next time you're shopping for something for your yoga practice, for yourself, or for a loved one, whether you need some clothing or jewelry or sage or crystals, go to savanaspirit.com and really put your dollars towards supporting this show. It means a lot. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you enjoyed this sort of summary episode. I look forward to your comments and your questions. Remember, you can always connect with me on social media at Larkin Yoga TV. That's on Twitter and on Instagram, and you can send me your requests for classes. And of course, you can practice with me for free on YouTube. I have a giant YouTube channel with so many classes and guided meditations that are just there for you completely free as a resource. So I'd love to see you on the mat as well. So much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Sivana Podcast. To find out more about Sivana, go to savanaspirit.com or follow Sivana on Facebook at facebook.com/Sivana Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at sivanaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode. And thank you for listening to the Sivana Podcast.